all the different colored benches. That's so cool. There's a paratrooper and a bunch of...
This was the very first visit to Conneaut Lake Park that summer in 2013. Actually, it was May, and I was going up just to visit the trustees of Conneaut Lake Park and to meet with Lenny Adams of Adams Amusements. I knew who he was, and I wanted to try and meet him for the first time just to let him know what I was interested in doing, to see if I could help out the crew there and fixing up different parts of the park. And I had already sent a letter a week or two in advance to the trustees and expressing what I wanted to do and several of the renovations I had in mind and ways to spruce up the park. And so I was going up there to meet Carol West and any of the other trustees that might be there at the time. What you see here in these buckets are a lot of different paints I had left over from the last season, from the previous season, where I had a lot of paint left over from different customers' houses. Usually I leave that with the customer, but certain customers don't want the paint lying around, so I would take it home and eventually mix it up into 4 or 5 big gallon, well actually I had about 7 or 8 when I was done, big gallon, 5-gallon buckets of brightly colored paint that you could use on different amusement park rides, benches, the bathrooms, different areas of Kittyland, and even the Midway games. And I had them mixed up specially into different big 5-gallon buckets. I also had another one with primer, and I actually had them all set up in a basement dungeon of mine where I would do all my sculpting, all my Halloween horror sculpting, and just stored it there until I was ready to take it up to Conneaut Lake. And here you see me actually putting it into the van and getting ready to drive up there with a lot of supplies, just so I can show everybody up there what I have to bring with me, and some of the paints I can use and actually donate to the park.
Okay, here it is, the blue streak. Can you believe I'm going to be painting this? I first set out to do that about 6 or 7 years ago. Even talked about it with them. And here I am. I'm going to paint this soon. For free. But anyway, I'm still going to paint it. What an awesome reference that is. I'm going to bring this thing back to life. This is the turn down here. I'll have to take another video. This is the turnaround down here by the road behind these pavilions. That's the section we're probably going to paint first. We're driving down the road.
Now, some of the actual projects that I wanted to do that I had talked to the trustees and Lenny about at Adams Amusements, some of the bigger ones were painting the front entrance, remodeling the Devil's Den, landscaping around the park, fixing up all the different dilapidated, falling apart, fences and buildings where I could patch and replace wood before I prime and paint them, and also painting the coaster, the world famous Blue Streak coaster. My ladders could get me up to about 40 feet, and I believe the first drop is 80, and the other drops are 50 and 60 feet. So I could do the majority of the coaster, all the lower parts, and I could do this on my own or bring my company employees up or do this with the help of volunteers. But I was willing to move up there to be close to the park and knock these projects out over time when I wasn't doing my own jobs, painting homes and churches and what I'm normally known for. And so a lot of those projects, well, at least some of those projects never came to fruition. They either weren't interested in having those things done. For instance, Lenny had some different ideas on Splash City, that area there, instead of opening the water park. I actually wanted to open the water park and try to do some repairs and research what it would take to get new pumps and such, and to actually patch all the holes and leaks in the lazy river. He had different options, different ideas for that area, and wasn't interested in the actual water rides. The trustees weren't interested in having the coaster painted. There were certain things I had to do that I was able to do, and there was other things that I had to kind of go through different channels like that to get permission. And so some of the projects fortunately did did come to pass, and I was able to do a lot of work up there with the help of many amazing volunteers and helpers that came up with me. But overall, we still had a great time, even though I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do. But I think we made a big difference that year. I'd been visiting the park, this several years leading up to that, and I originally started going in the 70s when I was a little kid, and stopped going when I was about 14. Came back in the 90s. That was in 85, by the way, 1985. Came back in the 90s, uh, probably about 10 years later, in 94, 95, and I realized it had been falling apart and it was in disrepair. I moved to Florida for several years after taking up a lot of paint to donate before I moved to Florida in 2006. Came back a few years later and began doing this restoration, which I had planned a couple years in advance before I ever left for Florida. In 2006, I was actually dealing with I believe it was a court-appointed custodian or manager. I want to say it was Leroy Stearns. There were a couple names I had, a couple cards, people I went up and spoke to either on the phone or in person there at the park. I was planning on doing this back then in 2005 and 2006 and was saving up from those 2 seasons from my own painting jobs. I had several buckets of paint mixed up at that point in time already as well, but wound up moving to Florida from 2006 to about 2012. And so I was gone for many years. During that time, there were fires at the park, rides were demolished, and buildings were ruined, and a lot of arson and damage was done. However, when I came back up in 2012 and then the following year, 2013, I did start painting and fixing things up there and doing my restoration work. But originally, yes, in 2006 is when I was supposed to begin, and we didn't really come to terms yet, but they knew what I had planned. Like I said, I'd actually visited the people who were in charge at that time, and I wound up donating I think it was about 5 or 6 5-gallon buckets of paint, so probably about 30 gallons of paint, as well as some primer and other materials that I took up to the park for them, since I wasn't going to be able to start the work since I was moving down to Florida. Now that was an original 30 gallons that I donated in 2006. Once I finally actually did start doing the restoration years later, when I moved back up to Pennsylvania and started in 2013, I spent all season there, including the fall months, so about 5 months, just about every weekend that I could make it up there for about 3 days each week. The other 4 days I was working around Pittsburgh and Katanning, Natrona Heights, Freeport, southwestern PA, doing all my painting and contracting, some landscaping and other things. But while I was working on the park, I actually donated another 70 gallons. So over those couple of years, the year that I worked at the park and also the year that I donated paint before that, I totaled over 100 gallons that I actually donated in all to the park. That doesn't include the truckloads of mulch and flowers and shrubs and other materials that I actually donated to the park by the time all of this restoration work and donations were done. Now, this initial visit where I'm walking around and showing this footage is just me walking around the park, looking at all the different areas I'm going to go ahead and maybe try and work on, whatever they'll let me anyway, trying to get some ideas of what needs repaired, what I can just paint and prime, areas that I can landscape, maybe build some big mulched up berms or islands of landscaping with lots of shrubs and flowers, areas I can fence off with rustic split rail fencing, which was another one of my ideas that I went to them with. So I'm basically just kind of gauging the park and also looking for Lenny and Adams Amusements so I can finally meet them. I don't know if he'd heard about me yet, but I was looking for him, and I had already spoken to the trustees by letter and by phone, and so I was going to meet with them as well let them know I'm up here just to take a look and hopefully meet who I can at that point in time. So I'm basically just walking around looking at the park at this point. Although I did visit in the weeks leading up to this initial visit. I call this an initial visit because it's my initial visit where I went up there to meet everybody and try to scope out what I was going to work on and see what they were going to let me, and also to show them some of the paints that I had brought up to show them what I was, the bright colors I could use on some of the actual buildings and rides and stuff. But I had come up in weeks before that as well, just to look around to get some ideas for myself before I ever wrote them a letter or even approached them regarding any of the work that I was planning on doing.
This is the main intersection between the different streets of Conneaut Lake Park. Carousel, bumper cars. Some of the buildings have been painted, some of the smaller ones have not. Some of the rides are still here. Other rides have been torn apart or taken down. You can see the Tempest or Witch's Stew and the Trabant in the distance. Devil's Den. Kittyland back there. I don't know if the camera can see it from here, but there's the Music Express right next to the Dodgem. Some more colorful benches. We'll go a little further and take another shot of the blue streak here.
Here you see a picture of where the ballroom, the Dreamland Ballroom used to be, which burned down several years before this time. And in the distance, you can see one of the purple roof, one of the old concession stands or game booths, and the actual park office right behind that. Now, right here in front of the water slide area, that's Splash City. There and across the street, on actually both sides of the midway, as I'm walking up and down, I'm noticing all different kinds of little areas where I could put little flower beds, not even little ones, but big ones. Placing a bunch of flower beds and like raised islands and mulched up berms of shrubs and all types of flowers where I can build these little gardens all along the midway up against the rides. On the right side where the blue streak and the train are located, and on the left side where you see the Music Express and the Dodgem and the Tumblebug, and right around the water slides. That whole area, there's a bunch of different little areas in between these rides and up along the fence and up against the buildings where I'm noticing I can make little mulched up islands and flowers and different areas where I can just kind of make things look a lot nicer. This area here looks like the area where the yo-yo used to stand. That was the black and yellow colored swings. They sort of rocked a little bit when you're on them. Yeah, a lot of the parks had them at that time, but that clearing right there, I believe, is where the yo-yo used to stand.
It's like a ghost town, but they've painted some stuff here. Some of the little buildings I was going to paint are painted now. Park doesn't open until 1 today, and it closes at 7. There's the old water tower that used to have, where is it? It used to have the Conneaut sign on it. This was the ultimate trip. This is a building that collapsed in a fire. Actually, the fire was over here where the ballroom was. It's not there anymore, but the heat caused other buildings around it to die. This is the main midway, where all the games were. It looks like they've done some painting because there's bright colors everywhere. At least painted in the last couple of years anyway. All these little benches are purple, blue, lots of color. Hotel Conneaut. Looks like it's mostly all painted new. It's not finished, but it looks really nice. And the beach facade looks okay. All that is painted.
And here's a couple photos of the Kaylee Bell and the Hotel Conneaut. And we also have some video footage of the whole beachfront area, which includes the hotel, obviously, the boardwalk, and the beach club. And right there next to the beach club, that area where the sand is, the beach, there actually used to be, back in the 80s when I was little, around 83, 81, there was something called the Rampage, which was probably about 3 stories high. It was a slide, like a big sliding board, but you go down on rollers. And on the rollers, you have a sled. You're going down on a sled, but you're going on these rollers. And when you get to the very bottom, you skim off the water until your raft or your sled finally kind of falls and you fall into the water. But you have to carry those all the way up and then slide down into the water. Well, that's about it for our initial visit before I started the restoration at Conneaut Lake Park. I would follow up with many, many visits over the next 3 or 4 months, actually the next 5 months when you consider the fall and all the landscaping projects and other fence painting projects that we had. So stay tuned for more uploads of the Conneaut Lake restoration visits. I'll be uploading many of those that took place back in 2013. I did have some of them on YouTube, on my Facebook page, and on my company website years ago. And now I'm just starting to put them back up there and actually add a lot more to them than what I ever had up there. So I'm making these videos of the coming weeks to show everybody what kind of work was done way back when the park was at least, still alive and still had some of the rides and some of the landscaping and before it started to go downhill a little further. All right, thanks for watching.